Welcome to the Dice Tower, a series of video reviews about board and card games. Here are your hosts, Tom Vasel and Sam Healey.
Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel.
And I'm Sam Healey, behind the walled city.
Which is the game we're talking about today.
Yes.
From Mercury Games. Now, I was curious what Sam would think of this game because your Mercury Games track record wasn't one that you were like a huge fan of their stuff.
This is true.
However, the idea of having a walled city, that usually works out well.
Has been done in the past, correct.
And this game has area control, which is one thing that I like. So let's take a look at it, and we'll be back.
Each game of Walled City is split up into 2 rounds, and both of the rounds are rather similar in what you do, but generally speaking, in round 1, you're going to be effecting control in the neighborhood section of the board, and then in round 2, the tower section or the walled section of the board gets added to that neighborhood section. So the first phase in round 1 is the align phase. And the align phase is simply choosing which of these guild cards the person is going to take that special ability that they're going to be able to use during the turn, and it also determines what order the players are going to go in. And the build phase, you are able to construct, settle, and adjust the dice. Now, in the construct phase, you're going to take one of the roads that you have been given at the start of the game, and you're going to choose which of the 2 places you're going to go. So a gray player would go there, and then he must choose to play one of his settle cards, and then the numbers on his settle cards, you look at the settle cards here, there are 2 numbers. There's one below and one on top. Think of this line right here as the road that you just placed out on the board, and you're going to be able to place 2 on one side and none on the other, or 1 on one side and 2 on the other. We'll use my 0-3 card, which allows me to place either side. I can put 0 here or 0 here, but whichever one I choose, I have to put 3 on the other side. You can put 3 peasants in there, or you can put 3 nobles in there, or you could do 1 noble and 2 peasants, or 2 noble and 1 peasants. It doesn't matter. Any combination of peasants and nobles. It's important to note here that nobles are going to decide ties. Then, once I've done this, I can change either the face of the die or this marker on one of the 2 that I went into. So instead of changing this to a 2, which is, it's at its highest level, so I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to turn this over to a -1, and that simply means that whoever scores this neighborhood is going to take -1 points to whatever points they get out of that neighborhood. So, as we're going through the game, gray player decides that he wants to use his special ability here, do his special ability at any point during his turn. And so what he wants to do first is, let's see here, we're going to play this guy right here. He's going to play a 1-3, which means that he can place 1 guy here, and then also play 3 on the other side. So he's going to do 1, 2, and 3 on this side as well. Then he's going to use his special ability. His special ability for the Mercers is 1 noble per player changes to your color. So here he would say this guy turns into one of my guys. And that's how you use the special ability at that point. You could probably just turn it over to denote that it has been used, and play would continue. So after the build phase, we then move on to the count votes phase. And in the counts votes phase, there are 2 parts. So there's neighborhood scoring and then faction dice scoring. Neighborhoods are denoted by the areas that are surrounded by roads and walls. Okay, so this is one neighborhood here, and then this is another neighborhood here. Here's another neighborhood. Each neighborhood is scored for majority, and the players earn 5, 3, 2, or 0 votes for 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place. In a 3-player game, of course, you're only going to go down to 3 places. So we're looking at 5, 3, or 2 points here. You have to have a presence there in order to score points, though. So, for example, this neighborhood here, who has the majority? Green definitely has the majority with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, while gray only has 1. So, the majority here, plus 1, is going to be 6 points. So, green in that neighborhood gets 6 points. Moves on the track. Then this one right here, the number of citizens is actually tied, but brown has more nobles than green does, so green gets second place and brown gets first place. Now with the factions, we look at the different neighborhoods of the board that have the different dice in them. For example, this neighborhood is an orange faction, while this neighborhood is also orange faction. So these citizens as well as these citizens are going to be compared to see who wins the votes for that faction. So we count up the number of citizens that are in each neighborhood, and whoever has the most wins the votes for that faction. So we see here that brown has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 nobles in this area, while over here we have green that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 citizens, but only 2 of them are nobles, and gray has 1. So clearly brown is leading the votes for the orange faction. Orange faction is worth 8 points. So brown scores 8 points. Then we move on to the defense phase, where we start laying down cards, defense cards, out here in these highlighted areas. For example, if this card is laid down here, this tower will get plus 0 points during scoring, while this tower will get plus 4 points during scoring. Once everyone has placed one of their cards down, face down, the round would reset here, and we would go through the second round, which is where we're going to be building walls around the outside of the city rather than the roads on the inside. And just like round 1, the first phase in round 2 is aligning with another faction. Now there are 4 choices out here, and in reverse order, so basically green would go first and then gray and then brown. They can choose what order they're going to go in. During round 2, the player is going to be constructing walls in these spaces in between the towers, like so. This is important because if there is any breach in the walls where nobles are, at the end of this round, these nobles are going to flee off the board and they will not be counted. As in round 1, you're still going to be playing your settling cards and you're going to be constructing walls. But the difference is that whenever you play a construction card or a settle card, it's going to be adjacent to wherever you go here. So, for example, if green player plays a wall there and they choose to play a 4-1, they can either play 1 and then promote 4 into one of these 2 towers, or they can play 4 into the neighborhood and promote 1 into one of these 2 towers. We go to the count votes phase of round 2, and the first thing that happens is that nobles flee through the fortification gaps. So every place that there is a gap in the wall, we have to look into that neighborhood and see if there's any nobles there that run away. So in these 2 neighborhoods, nobody's there. Nobles are here, but there's walls. So here there's a gap and there's a noble here, so that guy flees away. And that looks to be about all of the nobles that would flee. Then we would move on to the neighborhood scoring. Each neighborhood scores again, just like in the first round. After the neighborhood scoring, gray is in the lead with 56 points, trailed by brown at 52 and green at 45. Then we move on to the faction dice scoring. Now the faction dice scoring is the same as the first round, except that these tower dice are also included in that faction dice scoring, which means that the values of each faction have gone up. Then after the faction dice scoring is done, the defense phase happens for the second round. The player with a majority in a tower earns the combined value of the nearer portions of adjacent cards. So what we would do here is we would turn these over so that they're still facing the way that the players wanted them to face. And so the player with the majority is going to get the combined total of points from the two nearest values of each tower. So, for example, brown has a majority in this tower, but it's 0 points. So he doesn't actually get any points for that one. Here, however, brown has the majority here, so he's going to get 5 and 1. So that's 6 points for brown, taking him up to 58. This tower, there is a tie. So when there's a tie, there's no way to break the tiebreaker. Both players score those 4 points. So brown would get 4 up to 62, and green would also get 4 up to 79. And then whoever has the most points at the end of that scoring is the winner. If there is a tie, ties are broken in favor by the player with the lowest priority number here.
Well, I have to say I was really impressed with this game. I really enjoyed it. It took something, area control, that I like, but allows you to make your own areas, which I think is a good aspect. This is not the only game to have done this, but it's one of the simplest ones. This is not a complex game.
That's true.
Except maybe the dice. The dice always confuse people, I found.
Yeah, well, it's not complex to me because you do basically the same thing in both rounds of the game.
Well, the towers are added.
A little bit of nuances added to it, and that's where a little bit of the confusion might enter in. But I do enjoy, you kind of touched on it already, where the players in the game are determining where those areas are. They're not predetermined areas. And so when you put out a road, you are defining the board, and you're defining in part what those areas are going to be. And that's one of the things that I really did enjoy about it. I also liked how the construction cards allowed you to play on either side of the road or both sides of the road, depending on what cards you played. I really enjoyed that as well.
It's really interesting, the strategies in this game. You have those special abilities, and you have to use them at the right moment for the right time, and that's cool. But you can really do, and I think like for one time, we had this guy, and he had these several areas next to each other, and he was winning several areas, which was going to give him a lot of points. So somebody broke a wall which connected the areas. Yeah. So now he was only scoring for one of them, and everyone was like, ah! But at the end of the game, that area happened to have a die of every color. So that guy won the majority on every single color. And then he was going, ah! And I was annoyed. But I do like it's very much an in-your-face style game. You're not actually... Well, there's a couple cards where you hurt someone. Take your guy away and put guys there.
Yes.
But I am very intrigued as to what you're doing every single turn.
Yeah, and so that means there's very little downtime because you want to pay attention to everybody's turn, and what they do on their turn in part determines what you're going to do on your turn. And so you are engaged in everybody's turn, and that's one of the things. One of the other things that I really enjoyed about the game is there's virtually no downtime whatsoever.
Yeah, and it also plays really well with 3 players.
Yes.
Which I enjoyed because, 3-player games are not quite as common sometimes as 4. And then it gives you the variety of the 2 different sides of the board, which play very differently because the one side has fewer of those tokens to flip. It also has some areas where you need 2 walls to split between areas. The Borderlands side, I actually think I prefer the
Londonderry side?
Londonderry.
Yes.
Londonderry side. But still, 2 different sides, different special abilities for each side. If there's negative things, I'm not sure I like the fact that the meeples were nobles and the houses were peasants. That doesn't really correlate the theme. How is a house a peasant and the meeple noble? It's not a huge deal.
Yeah. It probably would have been more difficult to tell the peasants from the nobles if they were both meeples.
Yeah, that's probably true. Or they probably had a big surplus of house pieces.
Crown or something like that. I don't know. It didn't necessarily bother me. I didn't really think about it.
That's a super minor criticism.
I didn't really think about that until you mentioned it. But it just works. So I enjoyed the game. This is my favorite Mercury game. How about that?
Actually, it's my favorite Mercury game too. I like the simplicity. I like the idea. I think for me, I don't know. There's something about building the walls and you actually see the city coming together and it looks cool. And you're like, wow, I got all these people. I'm really controlling this region. Oh wait, that's the only region I'm controlling. There's some cool aspects to it, back and forth. So for me, this one gets 2 towers up. I like area control anyway. And many times today, area control games are like super convoluted, add all these weird things. This one's really straightforward. I can teach this in 5 minutes probably. I like that there's 2 distinctive halves too.
Well, I can't teach it in 5 minutes. You already know that. But,
No, you took your time. You were cautious and careful.
it was, yeah, I guess. But the idea behind this game is one that I really enjoy. Probably don't like it as much as Tom does, but I will give it 1.5 peasants up. The other one is like maybe the Black Knight or something like that after his run-in with Arthur.
I'll bite your knees!
Exactly. So I really do enjoy the game. It is one that I will enjoy playing if it ever hits the table, and or rather when it hits the table. And so that is Walled City from Mercury Games.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.